Troy sat alone in his dim basement office, the low hum of his computer servers filling the silence. On the main screen, a high-definition video played in a slow, endless loop. His wife, Diana, laughing softly in a luxury hotel suite while a man he once called his friend, Blake, poured champagne into her glass. She leaned back, her smile wide and unguarded, her wrist glittering with a diamond bracelet Troy had never seen before. He paused the footage, his chest tightening as he read Blake's lips form two quiet words. A new life. For a long moment, Troy stared without blinking. 8 years of marriage now looked like a stranger's movie. Cold, calculated, and final. Before we go deeper, where are you watching from today? Kindly hit like, comment, and subscribe to this channel for more. The video ended, but Troy didn't move. He switched screens and opened a folder filled with files he had decrypted the night before. Each message between Diana and Blake felt like a knife turned slowly. The prenup won't matter. We'll prove he misused company funds. You'll get full custody. Then Diana's words appeared. The kids barely know him anyway. Troy leaned back, the weight of betrayal pressing on him like armor. He had been betrayed before. By colleagues, by clients, but this was different. This was personal. They weren't just cheating. They were rewriting his life and stealing his children's love. Troy rose quietly, his eyes scanning the walls around him. The shelves lined with technical manuals, the metal filing cabinet, the faint smell of machine oil and dust. Upstairs, the house looked perfect, but it had never been his. Every rug, every piece of art, every family portrait had been Diana's choice. Even the smiles in those pictures now felt rehearsed. How much of this was ever real, he murmured. For years, he had told himself that success could heal anything, that money and hard work could hold a marriage together. Now, staring at his empty office, he realized he had been building an empire for someone else's happiness. He turned back to the desk and pulled out a locked drawer. Inside lay a thick brown folder. Bank statements, property records, and private investigation notes he had gathered quietly over months. He had sensed something long before the truth appeared on that screen. Diana trusted him with the family's finances and never questioned his documents. That trust, the one part of their marriage she believed unbreakable, would now become her greatest mistake. He flipped through the pages slowly, stopping at a photograph of Diana and Blake smiling at a charity gala. You both played the game, he whispered, but I wrote the rules. Troy shut the folder gently and sat back. His face calm but his mind already moving like a chess master planning a silent war. Rage was for amateurs, he reminded himself. Patience was his weapon. He had once worked in military intelligence before starting his firm, and precision was second nature. Diana and Blake wanted to fight in the open, using lies and lawyers. He would fight in the shadows, using truth and evidence. For a brief moment, his eyes softened toward the ceiling, where his children were asleep. This isn't about revenge, he murmured. It's about justice, for me and for them. The next morning, Troy woke before sunrise. He brewed black coffee, its bitter smell filling the quiet kitchen. The city outside was still asleep, but his mind was already running through scenarios. Each move, each counter. He turned on his tablet, scanning Diana's bank logs and emails. Her recent withdrawals, hotel bookings, and private dinner payments painted a story she thought she'd hidden well. He smiled faintly, not out of joy, but from the clarity that truth brings. If this is the war you wanted, he muttered softly, then it's one I'll finish without raising my voice. By noon, Troy was back in his office, not as a broken husband, but as a strategist. He reached out to an old military contact, a quiet digital forensics expert named Greg. Need clean metadata analysis, Troy said over a secure line. Greg didn't ask why. Same turnaround time. Faster, Troy replied. Within hours, encrypted chat logs appeared on Troy's screen, timestamps, IP traces, and device locations. Everything led to one conclusion. Diana had planned every step with precision. But what she didn't realize was that her precision was no match for his patience. Later that evening, Troy sat with his children, Connor and Madison, over dinner. Madison spoke about her school art project, while Connor showed him a science model. He listened carefully, smiling as if nothing else in the world mattered. Inside, however, a quiet ache pulsed beneath his calm. They think their mother loves them unconditionally, he thought. She probably does, just not the way she should. He tucked them into bed, kissed their foreheads and whispered, "I'll keep you safe no matter what." Then he returned downstairs, his heart steadier than ever. He spent the next few days building a case. Not one for court but for truth. Each document was neatly labeled and cross-checked. Each photograph and timestamp had a purpose. When he finished, he slid the stack of files into a fireproof safe. "Evidence," he said quietly, "not vengeance." He poured himself another cup of coffee, looked at the reflection in his darkened window, and realized something profound. Betrayal doesn't destroy the wise, it refines them. He wasn't broken anymore. He was awake. A week later, Diana made her move. She returned home late, perfume heavy, pretending everything was normal. Troy watched her set her handbag down and greet him with a smile too smooth to be real. "Long day?" he asked, voice calm. "You could say that," she replied, avoiding his eyes. He nodded slowly. "I bet." When she left for the shower, he opened her phone, unlocked with the same careless code she'd always used. Within seconds, he saw new messages from Blake. "Tomorrow's the day. He'll never see it coming." Troy smiled. "Oh, I see it already." The next morning, Troy was at the law firm before they were even open. He sat calmly in the waiting area, ignoring the curious glances from the receptionist. When the senior attorney, Mr. Lawrence, finally arrived, Troy greeted him with a polite nod. "I believe my wife and her associate have already spoken to you," he said. Lawrence hesitated, surprised. "And you are?" "Her husband for now," Troy replied. He placed a sealed envelope on the table. "Before you proceed with any divorce filings, open this." Lawrence frowned but obeyed. The moment he saw the documents, his face drained of color. The folder contained copies of confidential case records, evidence that could ruin not just Diana's family but anyone connected to her. Lawrence swallowed hard. "Where did you get this?" "Let's just say I don't play blind," Troy said calmly. "Tell Diana this. If she wants a war, she should learn the terrain first." Lawrence tried to compose himself, but his trembling hands betrayed him. "You're threatening a judge's family." "No," Troy replied. "I'm reminding them what truth looks like when it stops being polite." Then he stood and left, leaving the lawyer staring after him in silence. That night, Troy's phone rang 3 times. Diana, Blake, and finally her mother, Judge Patricia. He answered only the last one. "What do you want?" she demanded. "Justice," he said quietly. "You've built your reputation on lies. Have the records. You know exactly which ones." There was silence. Patricia inhaled sharply. "You wouldn't dare." "You already know I would," Troy replied, voice steady as stone. "Withdraw the petition. She signs full custody to me. Blake sells back my company shares. You step down from the bench. Or I let the truth breathe." Then he hung up. By morning, whispers spread. Journalists received anonymous tips, and quiet panic stirred in the Harrison household. Blake called repeatedly, his tone shifting from anger to desperation. "You're destroying us, man," he shouted in one voicemail. Troy listened, unmoved. "You destroyed yourselves," he murmured. Later that day, Diana appeared at his office unannounced, her flawless composure cracked. "Do you even care what this does to our children?" she cried. "I care enough to protect them from you," Troy answered simply. Her lips parted, but no words came out. For the first time, she looked genuinely afraid. 2 days later they met again, the final negotiation. The room was tense, papers stacked neatly before them. Diana's hands trembled as she signed away the things she had once used to define her. The house, the company shares, the custody. You win, she whispered. Troy leaned forward, eyes steady. No, Diana. This isn't about winning. This is about truth. She glared, then laughed bitterly. Truth. You were never enough for me. Troy smiled faintly. And yet, here we are. When she left, she was no longer the woman he married. Only the echo of her choices. When Diana walked out that day, Troy didn't follow. He sat alone in the quiet boardroom, his fingers brushing the surface of the signed documents. For years, he had imagined revenge might feel satisfying, but it didn't. What he felt was stillness. The kind that comes when a storm has finally exhausted itself. He packed the files into his briefcase and exhaled slowly. In his heart, he wasn't celebrating victory. He was mourning everything that once meant something. Betrayal had burned his life to the ground, but in the ashes, he had found clarity. The next morning, the city woke to headlines that shattered reputations. Judge Patricia Harrison resigns amid rumors of case tampering. Developer family tied to hidden scandal. Troy didn't speak to the press, didn't leak a single new document. He didn't need to. Truth, once released, had its own momentum. Patricia's name vanished from courthouse schedules within a day, and investors began pulling away from her husband's company. Diana's phone didn't stop ringing, but every call carried the same tone: fear, denial, or blame. The empire she fought to protect was crumbling before her eyes. Blake was the first to break. He left Troy a message late at night, his voice shaky. We can fix this. Just name your price. Troy played it twice before deleting it. Some mistakes, he thought, don't get fixed with money. A few days later, news broke that Blake's business accounts had been frozen under federal investigation. His name appeared in every headline, his picture beside words like fraud, embezzlement, and betrayal. He had built his fortune on deceit, and now deceit had eaten him alive. The irony wasn't lost on Troy. Diana tried to fight back quietly. She called mutual friends, tried to rebuild her reputation, even hinted that Troy had set her up. But people were smarter now, and evidence didn't lie. The luxury cars she once flaunted were sold one by one. Her mansion was mortgaged. Even her designer clothes began disappearing from public events. When Troy heard she had taken a job as a mid-level real estate agent, he didn't smile or gloat. Pride, he whispered to himself, is the most expensive thing a liar owns. Weeks passed. Troy spent his nights at home instead of his office. He cooked simple dinners, helped his children with homework, and learned to enjoy silence again. The first time Madison laughed freely after months of tension, he realized what real victory looked like. It wasn't in ruined careers or frozen bank accounts. It was in peace. Connor hugged him one evening and said, "Dad, I'm glad you didn't give up on us." Troy smiled, holding him close. "Never, son. Some things are worth fighting for, quietly." One evening, as the sun melted into the horizon, Troy stood on his porch, watching the streetlights flicker on. His phone buzzed, an unknown number. He answered, half expecting another journalist. Instead, a soft, trembling voice spoke. "Troy, it's me." He recognized it instantly. "Jana. I just wanted to say, I was wrong." Her words hung heavy in the air. "I know," he said finally. "But it's too late for sorry." There was silence, then a quiet sniffle before the line went dead. He stood there a moment longer, then deleted the call. Life after the storm felt different. Troy's company, Blackstone Security, began thriving again. Clients who once doubted him now lined up, drawn by his integrity. But Troy didn't chase growth. He chose balance. He hired a few trusted colleagues, men and women who understood loyalty. At night, instead of watching security feeds, he read bedtime stories to Madison and practiced baseball throws with Connor. Slowly, their laughter replaced the sound of anger in his heart. The past was still there, but it no longer defined him. Every once in a while, Troy would hear bits of gossip about Diana. How she'd moved to a smaller apartment, how she worked long hours to pay her debts, how people in her old circles whispered when she passed. He never joined those conversations. One night, while closing a deal at his office, he saw her name flash on his screen. An email, just 2 sentences long. "Thank you for not destroying me completely. I'll try to be a better person." Troy read it twice, then closed his laptop gently. Some lessons didn't need replies. Months later, Blake's face appeared on an international news site. Wanted. Former businessman linked to offshore fraud. The image showed him disheveled, older and frightened. Troy stared for a while, remembering the man who had once laughed beside him at company dinners. "You could have had everything," he whispered. "But greed doesn't share space with loyalty." He forwarded the link to a federal contact, not out of vengeance but duty. Then he shut his computer down and walked outside to breathe the fresh evening air. On a calm Saturday morning, Troy sat on his porch as Connor and Madison chased each other across the lawn. Their laughter echoed through the air, light, unburdened, alive. He watched them, smiling softly. For the first time in years, the noise inside his heart had gone quiet. He wasn't a soldier anymore, nor a betrayed husband, just a father who had fought and finally found peace. As the wind brushed his face, he whispered, "Some betrayals take everything from you, but sometimes they leave you with exactly what you need." Months turned into seasons, and the rhythm of Troy's life found a calm pattern. Every morning he walked his children to school, waved goodbye, and returned home to work from his study. The walls that once echoed tension now carried laughter and music. He no longer checked Diana's social pages or followed the Harrison scandals. That chapter was closed. One afternoon, as he repaired Connor's broken drone, he realized something profound. Peace wasn't the absence of conflict, it was the presence of control. He smiled quietly and whispered, "This is what survival looks like." His firm, Blackstone Security, became known for its integrity and precision. When new clients asked about his past, he answered calmly, "I've seen what dishonesty costs." Those words alone built trust faster than any marketing could. He hired veterans, single parents, and people rebuilding their lives. People who understood loyalty because they'd lived without it. His office became more than a workplace. It became a symbol of second chances. Some days, as he walked between desks, he thought, if pain has a purpose, maybe it's to build something honest afterward. One Friday evening, Troy attended a security conference for the first time in years. Colleagues greeted him warmly, some whispering that they admired how he handled the chaos. During his panel, someone asked, "How did you survive such a public betrayal without falling apart?" Troy paused, thinking carefully before answering. "Because anger is a short weapon," he said. "It burns hot but fades fast. Discipline, that's what lasts. The goal isn't revenge. It's restoration." The room went quiet, and the applause that followed wasn't loud. It was respectful. That night he returned home late, the city lights flickering outside his car window. Madison had fallen asleep on the couch waiting for him, a half-finished drawing on her lap. It was a picture of their family, her, Connor, and Troy smiling in front of their house. He stood there for a moment, watching her peaceful face, and felt tears sting his eyes. He had lost almost everything once, yet somehow he had gained what mattered most. Gently, he carried her to her bed and whispered, "You're my real victory, baby girl." The next morning, Troy took his children to a nearby park. They played catch, shared ice cream, and laughed freely. A few parents recognized him from the news and nodded respectfully. He nodded back but didn't stay long. He had no desire for pity or fame. When they reached home, Connor asked, "Dad, do you ever miss Mom?" Troy looked at him, his voice calm. "I miss the idea of her, not who she became." Connor thought for a moment, then nodded slowly. "I get it." Troy smiled. His son was growing wiser every day. As time passed, Troy noticed Diana's shadow fading from their lives. Madison stopped asking why Mommy didn't visit as often. Connor stopped checking for her car on weekends. Their world was healing piece by piece. Sometimes, Troy wondered if forgiveness was truly possible. He hadn't forgiven Diana yet, but he had stopped wishing her pain. That was progress enough. In quiet moments, he'd look out his window and think, maybe letting go isn't about forgetting. Maybe it's about refusing to carry the weight anymore. One afternoon, a letter arrived in Troy's mailbox. The handwriting was familiar. He opened it slowly. It was from Diana. "I know I don't deserve peace," it read, "but I wanted to thank you for protecting our children from the mess I created. They look happy. I hope one day you can forgive me." There was no signature, just those words. Troy folded the letter carefully and tucked it into his desk drawer beside the photo of their old family. He didn't know if forgiveness would ever come, but mercy maybe had already started. Weeks later, Troy was invited to speak at a leadership retreat for veterans rebuilding civilian careers. First he declined, but after some thought he agreed, not for publicity but for purpose. Standing before men and women who had also lost things, families, trust, identity, he told his story. "You can't always control betrayal," he said, "but you can control who you become after it." The hall was silent. When he finished, people stood not to cheer, but to honor the kind of strength that doesn't need noise. Weeks later, Diana finally gathered the courage to visit. She stood at the edge of the driveway, uncertain. Troy stepped outside quietly. For a moment neither spoke. Then she said, "You look happy." He nodded. "We are." Tears shimmered in her eyes. "I came to thank you. Not for forgiving me. I know that's not mine to ask, but for not turning our children against me." Troy looked at her for a long time and replied softly, "I didn't need to. Truth speaks for itself." They stood in silence, the distance between them no longer full of anger, just memories. Diana reached into her bag and handed him a small envelope. "It's for the kids. Drawings I made for them." He accepted it quietly. "You can come by sometime," he said, "when they're ready." Her eyes widened slightly in surprise, then softened. "Thank you." As she walked away, Troy exhaled deeply. For the first time, forgiveness didn't feel impossible. It just felt slow, like morning light breaking after a long night. That evening, Troy sat with Connor and Madison on the porch as the sun dipped low behind the rooftops. They talked about school, dreams, and silly jokes. The world had changed around them, but their laughter felt timeless. He looked at them and realized that the greatest revenge against betrayal wasn't destruction. It was happiness. "You know," he said quietly, "life will always test you. But if you stay true to yourself, no one can erase your story." Connor smiled. "Then we'll keep writing ours, Dad." Years later, Troy would look back on everything, the pain, the lies, the war, and realize it had shaped him into something unbreakable. His name, once dragged through mud, now stood for strength. His children grew up honest and kind, proof that integrity outlives deceit. One framed quote sat on his office desk: "Justice doesn't always roar, sometimes it whispers and still wins." And when visitors asked about it, he'd smile and say, "That line saved my life." For Troy Blackstone, betrayal wasn't the end. It was the beginning of truth.